Hey everybody, welcome to Whiskey and Pneumonia. I'm here with my co-host Nick Hatt, Drew Shapiro, as you all know, joined by Chuck Melki as well. Thanks for coming on the show today, Chuck. You've got quite a list of accomplishments and positions you've held throughout your career in local office and law enforcement, including police chief of Clayton Township. You've served as Township Supervisor of Gaines, served at the Sheriff's Office in Genesee County for a number of years. I'd love to hear the rest of your bio. I know it's lengthy, but first and foremost, thanks for coming on the show today.
No worries. My pleasure. Appreciate it.
Good to have
I've
you,
known
Chuck.
Nick, and Nick invited me, so here we are.
Yep. We met. I was considering running for an office, and you and I met. I got your opinion on that, and I did not end up running for anything, but I think we spent about 15 minutes talking about it, and the other 2 hours was everything else. So
Right. We thought both being a pretty bad idea, getting involved in certain offices within Genesee County.
Yeah. Was this the very sought after Genesee County Commissioner role that I'm familiar with?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. So we dodged a bullet on that one.
Actually, we were surprised because there was a newcomer that came in that had zero political experience, zero exposure, I think, to political experience. And I happened to know her. It was a fluke, and she ran and she won pretty convincingly, actually. Yep. And she didn't put out a sign or a advertisement or nothing, which was really surprising. I didn't know if she'd have a chance or not, but she did. And God bless her. She's working there now, and I think she's had a taste of it because I've talked to her several times, and she's this isn't what it's all cracked up to be, all the cutthroat and backstabbing going on.
Right. A lot of that, for sure.
Yeah, I know. I think my exact words to you, Nick, when you were considering that run for county commissioner were, as a friend of mine, it's not something I'd wish on you. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, no, that was it. So we turned away from that.
Right on. So I think ultimately we have a lot of shared experiences throughout the county. Chuck, obviously yours are different, especially with the policing aspect. Can you go into a little more detail about what you've done?
Sure. I'll try to keep it 3 minutes or less. But I started the sheriff's office in 1979. I was actually 17 years of age. I was working in a college class. I got out of high school a little early with my credits, and I did what was called a practicum in law enforcement. It was actually run by, at that time, he was a lieutenant, Joe Wilson, the sheriff for 16 or 18 years. Wow. And I took that class, and you had to pick a police department to go work at. And my father knew some people at the sheriff's office, and I got a job, or I guess a mentorship there, working in the Genesee County Sheriff's Department radio room. They thought I was 18, but I couldn't work in the jail, so they kept me in the radio room till I was 17. And then as soon as I turned 18, they actually hired me in the jail. And then I was one of the few deputies, if not the only deputy, that worked every division within the sheriff's office. I worked in the jail. I worked Marine Patrol. I worked the courts, where you're a patrolman that stands next to the judge and kind of guards the judge and brings in the prisoners, which was one of my most unique experiences in there. I'll explain it later. And then from there, I went to the traffic division patrol. I went to paramedics. I then went to the Flint area narcotics group when it was a huge unit. We had about 30 detectives there. And then from there, I was promoted to sergeant in the detective bureau and stayed there. And then from there, I went back to the general detective bureau at the county, and I worked major crimes, internal affairs, and I ran several of the contract patrol divisions, only because I was also the union president, so I had to do all the numbers for the county, negotiate the contracts. And then from there, I went to the FBI gang task force at the prosecutor's office and was in charge of internal affairs for the prosecutor, because really people don't realize this. The prosecutor is your main law enforcement officer. Mm-hmm. And so anything that was possibly criminal against other police officers, there was myself and another detective there, and we would review them and give our opinions on them and meet with committee with the prosecutors. And then from there, I ran for sheriff.
Did you really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I ran for sheriff in early 2000. And then I think I ticked off the new sheriff who'd been appointed, and they moved me back to the courts. They have that latitude to move you around. So I got moved back there, but it was a great career for almost 22 years, and they probably spent $500,000 in my training. And training's where it's at, because everybody complains now about police officers not having training or defund the police. Mm-hmm. And when I teach a class every Saturday to 12 to 15 civilians to this date, on concealed gun carry, and I tell them, because some of them are all from all different backgrounds. It's very unique. And I tell them, I'm like, you guys want to defund the police. Some people are kind of anti-police that come in there. Some are pro-police. And I'm like, you want to defund the police, but you want them to have more training. It's an oxymoron, what you're saying. And I tell them my training, they said, that's really great. And I tell them, you really need to train officers. You really need that. So that was my 22-year career there, roughly. And then I retired, and I had enough time in to retire. And Swartz Creek City picked me up, and I did most of their training because I was also a training officer at the county, and doing training for them, training their new officers. While there, Clayton Township called me and said, we would like you to start a police department. I wasn't police chief. They didn't even have a police department. Wow. So they said, we need it up and running in 120 days. Can you do it? We're thinking about it. And I gave them a proposal, and they hired me as police chief. And my first 120 days was figuring out how to get a police department with nothing but a pencil and an open field started, up and running. And I did that, worked there 7 years. Politics got involved in that again, when you have a change of board. And after that, I ran for township supervisor. I won. I was there for a few years. I didn't get along with the board. They were more of a good old boy system. They didn't like rules or regulations. And while there, I built a gun range. I bought an old vacant building and gutted it and built it out. And I still had a lot of connections, so I had a lot of good people that could help me. And construction was down in 2009, 10. There was hardly anybody working, so I could get reasonable prices. And I built a gun range, and it's been a successful gun range. And I ran for school board several years ago and won that. I was on several other boards since then, appointed boards.
So you really dislike serving the community? I
love serving the community. I call myself a public servant. I don't call myself a politician.
Amen to that.
That was my problem. I had that mentality that I'm still an officer. I'm serving the public. You have to do everything fair, just, and right by everyone, no matter whether you like them or not. You just got to treat everybody the same. But when I got in the political field, that's whole different. You got to be really cutthroatish, and I think that's why I went through several jobs in that field, because I'm just not going to cut anybody's throat. Even if I don't like them or I dislike them or love them, it doesn't matter. You just got to treat everybody fair. Hopefully that'll come someday where some of our other people start thinking that way. I think there are a few out there, but I think we're in the minority. That's the problem.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And from my personal experience, I think you see a lot of people get to those county seats and some local seats as well. And, they come in with good intentions. And somewhere along the way that changes, whether it's pressure from the peers, pressure from the system, and the system being Genesee County as a whole. I mean, for those who are listening who don't know, fifth largest county in Michigan, Flint, Michigan being the county seat. Everyone pretty much is familiar with the water crisis and things that have happened over the last few years. But it's an interesting place to be involved as a public servant and truly try to be a public servant, because you have all sorts of competing personalities, competing agendas. And, I experienced that firsthand. You can have great closed-door conversations with people. You get into that boardroom, and it's like you're talking to a different person.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me. I was actually on the Water and Waste Board for a few years along with the 911 Consortium. And you're absolutely right. You kind of come to consensus on what's best for the community. And that's what you're elected to do, is to make decisions. You're running a business, basically. Mm-hmm. And you go out there, and then you see board members that don't vote the way that they indicated they were going to vote, maybe without doing any Open Meetings Act violations or anything. You got to be careful of that.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, you kind of get a flavor of what they're going to do, and then they flip, and then you find out there was somebody pulling their strings, and it's really unfortunate, because it's really hurt Genesee County. It's hurt Genesee County as a whole. Genesee County should have kept most of its population, although we lost GM. We're still a major hub. People don't realize this, but Genesee County is one of the few counties that has 3 highways running through it. A lot of the counties don't. We have, US 23, 75, and 69. And for some reason, everybody's like all hung up on GM. And hey, my dad worked at GM. I get it. But at the end of the day, I think bad leadership has helped come and exacerbate our demise. GM was part of it, crime. But people start leaving when they see poor leadership. If you have great leadership, I think a lot of people will stay and tough it out. And that's how tough communities make it, is they tough it out. They manage, I can't think of the right word for it. They acclimate, and then they try to move on. And fortunately, in our county, we've lost so many people. I mean, Flint City had 200,000 people, and we were the second largest city in the state of Michigan.
Yeah, right.
Now we're like, I don't know, we're way down compared to what we are. So that right there tells you. And I know a lot of it was based on GM, but you got the same leaders running the place, just in different titles, and nothing's changed for the residents. Hence, public servant versus politician.
Oh, yeah. And you have these political dynasties now, too.
I don't want to mention the names, but there's 4 or 5 names that you can, one starts with a K, one starts with a C, one starts with a G, one starts with a P, and they stay in power, and they hand the baton off to someone, and the public complains, yet they vote for them. And I'm like, it's almost like the 1400s England kingdoms. It's just like somebody goes away and they give it to their nephew or their cousin or their brother or their uncle or a son or their bestie, and it stays in that thing, and no one else has a chance to do anything. And it's refreshing, at least for me now, being on the school board. We have a great group of people, and they're not part of that dynasty, and you can talk to them, and we can agree to disagree, but always come for what's best for the school district. And at first, I had a little rough time, but they could see my intentions were true. And, I'm more of a businessman. What can we do to save the district money while we're still providing education and security, which is our 2 main goals?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can relate to that from my time on the school board.
That's right. You were on one. Yeah.
From Fenton School Board, County Commission, run for State House. The $1 a year job on the Fenton School Board was by far the most rewarding. You felt like you had a collective goal with this group, and it's to educate these kids, prepare them for the real world as best as possible, make sure it's in a safe environment. And, there were disagreements, and there's always going to be disagreements, but at the end of the day, that's what it was about, making sure we had the best teachers, most qualified people in the classroom. And it was interesting at that local level of government, probably what most people would view as the smallest elected position. You have the ability to probably affect the most change and impact the most lives. And that brings me to another topic. With your experience in local government, my experience, Nick's experience with the county party and things like that, I think so many people are just myopically focused on national politics, and they don't really think about the things that take place in their backyard and actually have the most effect on their day-to-day lives. Has that been your experience to some degree?
I think so. Yeah, but Nick's in the. I think you're. I want to mention you're in the R party.
Right.
I'm a traditional D, but I call myself a renegade D. But where I've got a lot of Republican views, more independent views, Republican and Democrat.
Right.
And I think we all do at this table, no matter what you put in front of our names. But I agree with you on that we kind of look in our own backyard, but now. The political flavor in the country is affecting small communities. So we have to, I think, start paying attention more to who's our U.S. congressman, what's he done for us, who's our U.S. Senators, who is our state representatives, and people need to concentrate more on that. And I get this. I get the same way. I'm just like, screw it. I'm not even going to think about it. I got to go to work. I got to pay bills this week. I got to change oil in the car and worry about what the wife wants. And you got to take care of family first. But at the end of the day, it's just something that gnaws at you. And I think a true American, a true person that has any self-esteem or pride is eventually going to have to. They're just going to have to dive into this, even if they don't get involved in the political end of it or the public service work end of it. They're going to have to say, this really affects me, my kids, Is this what I really want? I know some people don't care, but I still think there's a majority of us that do care. But you're absolutely right, 100%.
Yeah, no, it's tough too. And I can't imagine having run for office with kids. I hope to have kids someday. I hope I'm blessed with that. But how dirty it's gotten, even at the state rep level, the county commission level.
Right.
I can't imagine, my kids going to school, potentially being bullied for what their dad voted for, didn't vote for, what he said or didn't say. And, I get asked all the time, like, hey, Drew, are you going to run for, office again? And it's like, well, first and foremost, you're telling me you need more people like me in office, but where were you last time when I was holding fundraisers?
Right.
Where were you last time when I was doing events and standing up and trying to, I think this is overused, but drain the swamp in more ways than one, not on a partisan level.
That's an excellent term. When I think Trump might have coined it 4 or 5 years ago, and I never heard it, and not that I agree with him on everything, but that is a great term, because wherever you go in politics, and the bigger it gets, it's just a bigger swamp. And apathy set in. A lot of people just want to go to work. Well, I shouldn't say that. Nobody wants to go to work nowadays. It seems like it seems like everybody I talk to can't find a worker. But no, you're right. Apathy set in, and there's a swamp, and they want you to step out there. I think people want somebody to step out there that they believe is honest, to go out there and do the job for them. They just don't realize, unless they've been involved in it or close to somebody, how strong of a person you have to be, how much intestinal fortitude you have to have. And, it's nice to have somebody that has your back, because running the union, I ran the union more than anybody at the history of the sheriff's office or in Genesee County. As a chief negotiator. And they're like, go get him, Tiger. Go get him, Chuck. A little Tiger. They said, you're a little Tiger. Go get him and fight for us. And I did, but it seems like every time I turned around, like, hey, we need some support at this month's meeting, or we need you to come to a board meeting to help, support your medical benefits or whatever you have, because cops don't make a lot. The only thing we have is a small pension and our medical benefits. And that's what a lot of police officers work for. They just want an honest living and do that. And I would turn around when I asked somebody to come to a meeting, and there'd be 3 people out of 300 deputies there. And I'm like, wow, it's just, it gets depressing. And I think the good people that are in politics see that, and then they just kind of shrug their shoulders. And after a few years, they're like, I'm tired of taking hits. And they quietly, the smart ones go away.
Yeah.
Unless you're hard-headed like me or other people, but that's just what seems to happen,
Oh yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, I felt a few times in there, in that county boardroom, I kept a stress ball.
Yeah.
And I worked that thing out, because there were points where I felt like I might just keel over. I mean, it was.
And you're a young man. You're much younger than me. I'm in my 60s, and you're,
frustrating doesn't even begin to sum it up.
Yeah.
Especially if you're there for the right reasons. You're trying to make changes, not just go along with the status quo.
Right.
No, it's beyond frustrating.
I would love to see some boards, without mentioning which ones, just be cleared. Just clear them out. It almost needs to be. I've always thought about this in politics. They do, a lot of them do such a horrendous job that it would be better to take a lottery system, like a bingo lottery system, or like a jury duty, and say, hey, Nick,
right,
B-17, Nick Hatt got picked, so you're going to be the U.S. congressman for the next 8 years. 2
years.
Yeah, okay. 2 years. Or, Drew Shapiro, you get B-36, you got picked, you're going to be a state senator or a U.S. representative. And then, as long as...
Interesting.
No, seriously, that's the number one criteria. And the second criteria is that, this is just me thinking at night, over I've been involved in this for 43 years, since I was 18, 17, because sheriff's officers are very political. And the second thing, and the biggest thing is you have to take a general aptitude test. Because I've seen a lot of my fellow people on the boards, and I'm like, dude, you can't even add 2 + 2, and you're dealing with $2 or $3 million at a township level in taxpayers' dollars. But, they may be popular. Their family may be popular. They may have a hook into the community for some reason, and not a good hook. And then it's like, wow, how did you become in charge? And we just did some basic arithmetic here. And you can't You can't do basic or read 2 paragraphs on what this contract says that's going to obligate the township, the city, the county for years to this. And so, and the third thing is if you own a private business, and I got to be careful with this because some people unfortunately file because they have no choice. But if you filed bankruptcy 1, 2, 3 times or keep changing the name of your business to hide from other people, those 3 things, those 3 things,
exactly right.
Those 3 things should disqualify you from running taxpayers' money. So you've got a business that's running pretty good. You know what I mean? You filed bankruptcy 3 times. I mean, it could happen to anybody once, right? It could happen to me. It could happen to you. It could happen to you, Drew. We're all quasi-business people. It could happen to us. But when people I see in their records, they've been elected, they've been convicted of crimes, felonies, they have been, or even high court misdemeanors, and they can't pass an aptitude test, and they've been bankrupt 3 times and changed the business of their name 3 times. Why are we giving you millions of dollars of taxpayers' money to do it? And I think the public needs to do that, hence my lottery system. If those 3 things don't happen, then you're good to go. Because I'd rather have Joe Blow, John Q. citizen like me, that's an honest guy, that's a hard worker, take care of it, because he'd be more articulate about where the money's going, how it's being spent.
Right, and he's not going to let him spend it on stupid shit.
Right.
Absolutely. Because that's not what he's capable of doing in his daily life.
Or their contractor buddy hasn't got it or something. Right. And I see that, and the more and more I put my toe in that swamp, you can see more and more of it as much as you went up or down the hill. First time I was supervisor, hey, we'd like to take you to dinner and give you tickets to the ball game and do this. It was to get one of our contracts. And I'm like, dude, you don't have to do that. Just give me the price. I'm going to take 3 sealed bids, and we'll take in consideration if you've done a job for us before and it's been really well. I think that's fair. I mean, that's how you would run your household, right?
Yeah.
You get 3 bids to do some work at your house, and maybe you've done some work with this contractor before, so you know his reputation. So he may be the same price, but you got a relationship with that person. So we'll use you instead of you, or we'll give this new guy a chance because this guy's starting to slip on his job.
Right.
Yeah, and ironically, in a lot of these boards and a lot of these committees, the last thing they want is the finance person on the finance committee. The last thing they want is the finance guy being chair of finance.
Well, your background's all financial, fiduciary stuff, investment of hardworking people's money.
Yeah, and the last thing they want is someone up there sitting at the podium screaming about how something being 80% funded or 60% funded when we're talking about retiree health care and pension plans.
Oh, don't start me on that. That's a whole other issue I fought.
And then hearing that, we're 80% funded, that's good.
Okay. That's not good. You don't pay 80% of your consumer's bill.
Right. I happen to be a county retiree, and about 3 years ago that came up. Genesee County said, we're just going to cut, we're going to cut the current contractor for retiree benefits, and we're going to give you a different contractor. And I don't think anybody was really opposed to that. It was just that the level of service was going down. And we made a letter of agreement, a gentleman's agreement, a handshake, a full-blown contract saying, no, our benefits will stay here with this company. And I talked to several of the county commissioners in person. And I don't know if you were there, Drew, when they started that or not. I think you just left.
I had just
left.
I think I had just left. I was there from 17 and 18.
Yeah, and then it was at the tail end of 19, the beginning of 19 is when they started that. And they said, hey, we're gonna do these to your benefits, that to your benefits, and me having to write the contracts from 1987 to 2000, and actually the contract lasted almost 2005, my last contract. I'm like, listen, you signed the contract. It's a great contract. You guys, what happened is that they didn't pay money into it every year to keep it funded, basically. What they did is they just said, well, we got to put so many millions in here to fund retirees' benefits. But, it's okay right now. We're just paying it out of the general fund, so we'll pay it out of this fund, and we'll pay these other bills and buy these other extras. So when your well is going dry in your house, and you're like, the guy said my well is going to go bad in 5 years, and it's $5,000, well, then you take $1,000 a year, sock it away for that. You just don't wait till it says, well, it's due, and now I'm going to not pay the consumers. It doesn't work that way. And and this is how ignorant a lot of the politicians are we have. They told me, well, we'll just go into receivership. It's like, it's okay for the county to go bankrupt. And I'm like, I just looked at him in amazement. I'm like, it's okay for the county I've lived in for 61 years, that I've lived, served, I've worked here my entire life, to go bankrupt. I says, this is how ignorant you are. Remember when I go back to the aptitude test?
Yeah.
I says, if we go into receivership where a judge comes in and says, okay, you guys are bankrupt and you have this many bills and this and that, that's how dumb these people are. I says, they still may make you pay your retiree benefits. And they just looked at me with a cross eye. I'm like, the judge will determine with whatever money you have left on what's paid and what's not. Now, essential services will stay open, prosecutor's office, sheriff's office, health department, but he may cut that immensely, and he may say you need to put that $10 million for retiree benefits, so you're not serving anything by proving how stupid you are.
Right.
And they just... And who would want that attitude anyways? We'll just go into receivership. If we get sued by former employees and it's a big mess and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, you know what? These are the people that represent this county. And it's almost like you just want to move out of the county. But a lot of us have an investment in our houses, our businesses,
right.
And it comes back to, local, county, state, it's all the same. We can complain about the county, but if we went up the ladder, it's going to be just as bad.
Oh, yeah. The county's just a microcosm.
Yeah. Yeah, and the cities and townships are too,
it's just
of the county.
Really, really bad example of the microcosm.
So I think you're right. I think there's not enough.
Or good example of what it's not supposed to be,
right.
depending on how you look at it.
But there's not enough good, average John Q. citizens that you referenced running. And I think the reason they're not running is because there are so many things they're going to get hammered on. There's all these hot button issues that people love to beat the hell out of people with, and one of which is policing. You've been a cop forever. I'm sure you've seen your fair share of police tactics and change and training, and
it's been the biggest from the 70s till now. Correct.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've spoke to a few police officers that these are good guys that I don't know them really, really well, but I know them well enough to know that they're decent people. And I think a lot of what happens is people just see the badge; they don't see the guy wearing the badge. How do you combat that?
I don't know anymore. When I hired in the police department, it was like a pride, and we didn't make a lot of money.
Right.
I worked at the sheriff's office for $4 an hour. My first paycheck in January of 1980. Remember 79? I had that internship. Then they hired me. Right. And they said, no, we can't hire you. You turn 18, Chuck. So then they backed it off till, late 79, early 80. And it was just, I was proud. I was proud to wear the uniform and the badge. And you kind of feel like we all have the syndrome. We call it the John Wayne syndrome.
Right.
The first couple of years, you want to go in there and, hey, I'm here to help the damsel in distress and lock up the bad guy and save, the dog.
Right.
At the end of the day.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that was then. This is now. My sons are in law enforcement. My brother is, my younger brother. I have a half brother that's 16 years younger than me who's in law enforcement, got in a lot later than me. My wife, 25 years in the police department. And I don't know today, even though I'm hard-headed and stubborn about a lot of things, I don't know if I could do it because there's so many restraints. And it's not about the police officers are brutal or police officers are this or that. Hey, sometimes you got to slap somebody in the face because you know what? When you've been to somebody's house 27 times and the woman's calling saying, I don't want this guy on my porch anymore, and then the guy gets up in your face and wants to fight with you, at some point, you restrain him, take him to jail, but a lot of these guys are already violent. They want to fight, and they want social workers to do this job. I hope to God that they never do it, but in a way I want them to do it in a test area to see what happens, as long as it's not in our area. We have enough problems as it is. So let them do that and see how it works. Most of these people come back. They're like homing pigeons. They get out of jail. Oh, I found the Lord. I love my woman. I'm going to go get a job, and I'm going to do a good thing. And you know what I always do when I saw that? Whatever division I work, I shook their hand. I says, I hope you're telling me the truth, and I wish you all the luck because why reproduce the same thing over and over? You're wasting money. So at the same time, I wish them luck, but I would say probably 40 to 60% of the people came right back 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Right. And you remember they had the 3 rule, the 3 strike rule, you're out.
Right. Yep.
I mean, at some point, this is what the taxpayers have to look at. They're actually spending more money by letting them out than they are by incarcerating them, and they don't get it. They're like, what do you mean? Well, if I let a guy out for robbery, says it's his first offense, he goes out and does it again, or some type of major felony, then he's put into the system again. There's a police officer tied up, a victim, which is the biggest thing, a detective. Then you got to go to the prosecutor's office. Then you got to appoint a court appointment attorney. So now you spent more money doing all that, and 9 times out of 10 they're guilty. Then you're guilty. Then you put them back in prison or jail, depending on their length of sentence. And then they get out again. You say, well, we're going to give this guy another chance. He goes through the system again. So he's been through the system 3 or 4 times. He's harmed people. He's done property damage. He's done human damage. And then it costs more money instead of just incarcerating him and leaving him in there, especially after the 3rd strike. I'm pretty lenient. As I got older, I got a little bit more lenient. I'm like, hey, listen, yeah, this guy's a nice guy. You know, he's really a good person. You know, he just keeps having bad luck or bad choices. You give him a 3rd choice or a 3rd chance, 4th chance. But after that, it's obvious. It's very few of those people are not going to do it a 5th time. And at that point, you just got to lock them up and then let them out when they're 65. Right. Everybody's like, why 65? I'm like, well, by then or 60, pick an age that you think they're not going to do what.
Right. The recidivism rates in this country are unbelievable. But, you know, I don't think incarceration's the answer for a lot of things.
No. Rehabilitation on the 1st or 2nd offense is huge because you got to correct them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't think a lot of people want to be corrected. You know, the
yeah.
Chuck the police officer's the problem. You know, not what I did, not how I handled the situation. And
right.
It's tough because I think police officers catch the brunt of, you know, a bad attitude, a bad upbringing. My 3rd, 4th, 5th offense, you know, they blame it on a heavy-handed police officer, not I'm an asshole.
Right. But then there are, you know what I tell everybody? That's great because I use that in my class every day, you know, every weekend. I say, hey, listen, because I get a lot of kids that are referred to me that have a CCW violation. So what that means is they carried a concealed weapon. They didn't know the law. They got in a little hassle with somebody. Sometimes the judges send them to, you know, like a gun class, and some of them come to mine, and I tell them, hey, listen, guys. I says, 90% of the cops out there, not everyone, but 9 out of 10 are good guys or good women or good transgender, whatever. We had everybody working in the police department. And I said, there's always that 1 or 2 that are going to make us all look bad. I had a bad procedure done by a doctor. Right. Can I blame all the doctors? And it was horrendous. So at the end of the day, I can't hold that against people. And I try to explain that to them. And I say it's bad in the factory. It's bad in the concrete business. It's bad in the financial business. You guys all know somebody.
Right.
That 1 or 2 people that should not be in your business, as I do in the police department. I try to weed them out. That's why I like internal affairs, because it gives us all a what?
Right.
Bad name. But at the end of the day, our society isn't perfect, and no job is going to be perfect. So we got to take the good with the bad. And the little bit of bad, I think, the good still outweighs it immensely. And you try to weed that out. And the suspects and the people, the community that say, well, the cops are assholes, right?
Right.
And they arrest me for no reason. They made up stuff. In my entire career, I've only seen 2 people lie on something, and I called them out on it. And that cost me grief because they were popular within the police department. Right. And then here it comes right back at you. Goes back to our original comment about being honest, being, you know, no one's perfect, but overall you're an inherently honest person or you're not.
Right.
And I think that's what occurs. And when a suspect gets arrested by 5 different police departments in 5 different jurisdictions, because we have a crap load of them in Genesee County, you know, a lot of communities have their own police department. Mm-hmm. It can't be that they just pick the asshole police officer in each one of those 5 jurisdictions. Right. And so I'm going to side with the police officer. Once again, 90% of the time, there are some that should not have a badge.
Right.
They should not have a gun. They should have no authority at all.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I think we can say that about any job description or any job that's out there. And I've seen tons of cops go. I know one police officer, he used to go to people's houses, and he was the guy you thought would never do this. And he would actually take them out and buy him clothes on Christmas, people he knew. And I'd be like, and I'm going to mention his first name only, Bill. And I'm like, and he was partners with me for 2 years. I didn't even know this till after we stopped working together. And I thought, dude, you have a heart of gold. So there's that 10% that have hearts of gold, the 10% that are shit, and the 80% that are, like us, right?
Right. I think it's got to be difficult when you're in a profession, including policing, when you're dealing with people on likely what is probably one of the worst days of their life. And how do you navigate that situation? How do you not take it home, realizing, not even just from a suspect or a criminal's perspective, but the victim.
Children dying in your hands.
Children.
As a paramedic, I had that happen to me dozens of times, and people don't see that. That's why a lot of police officers are alcoholics.
Right.
And they go home and they drink because that's a legal way of getting around, back then. I know weed is quasi legal in Michigan, although it's not federally. But I mean, a lot of police officers I knew, not all of them, but a lot. I don't know the percentage, but a lot of them would go and drink. And I would do that a little bit if I had a really rough day. It had me a couple shots. And but my philosophy is I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I'm going to stay at home, not be out drinking and driving, and you deal with your demons your own way. Working as a paramedic, and I'll vouch for all my fellow paramedics, future paramedics, past paramedics, nothing worse than working a first shift, because first shift was a lot of your heart attacks. People get up in the morning and you show up to somebody's house and their dad's dead and there's 3 kids crying and, mama's on the floor wailing and you're trying to work on this kid, and we concentrate on your job to try to save them. And but that still affects you when you take them to the hospital. We're one of the few counties in the country that have paramedics and police officers. And it tried on you. And worse than that was the SIDS deaths, because a lot of SIDS deaths, Southern Infant Death Syndrome. Yeah. A lot of kids, because I was a first shift medic most of my, the years that I was assigned to that, for the couple years I was assigned to that. And I dreaded 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd say, any calls pending? And there's always 10 calls pending because there wasn't that many paramedics out back then in the 80s. And it was a SIDS death or, heart attack and a car accident. But the SIDS deaths are really bad because the kids have been dead for probably, 2 to 3 hours based on the lividity that they have in their body, the rigor mortis. Yet you performed for that parent because that parent was grieving. You wake up, because, they put their baby to sleep, and then they wake up at, 6, 7 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. They go in to wake up little Johnny, and Johnny's not what? Waking up, or Susie. And then, they call the paramedics. You show up. Everybody's in complete hysteria. Pick the baby up. You start doing your protocols, working on the baby. And then you're dealing with that anguish, because I've had several children. Everybody, that I knew at the police department pretty much had children, and you're thinking, wow, this just happened. And this could happen to any of us. So we become more paranoid. That's why I think a lot of police officers are a little bit paranoid. They're like, hey, make sure everything's right in the crib and this and that when you have babies, because that thing never leaves you. I can remember 2 for sure that I will never forget. And then, loved ones at a car accident. Somebody shows up, there's their father, mother, baby, usually a daughter or son that's not a good driver, crushed. And you're trying to hold the scene, work on them, and do 8 million other things. So there's a lot of issues that police officers deal with. And the only thing I can say is that alcohol, that's not the right thing. Counseling, there should be more. They want to talk about counselors for the bad guys. Maybe you should have counseling for what?
Right. Absolutely.
Because the cops have to go home. There's no money in the budget for training. There's nobody to have enough cops out there. And then they want to bitch about defund the police, which is it's an oxymoron. And then this guy or girl or whoever is suffering from the last 2 weeks of whatever they've had to deal with, and you just throw them out to the weeds. Self-medicate. Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, and I think it goes back to what Nick said. People just see that uniform, they see the badge, they don't realize there's a real person there. And these are things that get dealt with on a daily basis across the country, across the world. And people just chalk it up to, or have this view, or it's, hey, cops and robbers, not, not what it really is, not what a lot of that job entails, and that piece you got to take home and deal with.
Flint City started a program. They were a very proactive, big police department in the 70s. They were rated like number in the top 10 in the country out of every police department. And the sheriff was close behind, our sheriff's office. They were modeling each other, competing with each other. And Flint City started, in fact, I think it was Joe Wilson of all people. My memories, I can't be factual on everything. It's been 45 years of me doing this, 42 years. But he might have started one of the first foot community patrolling units, going back to the old days of knowing everybody in the neighborhood instead of driving around in a vehicle. And that, I want to say that was their highlight, because people were all pro-police because they got to know the police officer, like Nick said. Because Nick said they see the badge, they see the uniform, and then what happens is they got to know the officer. And, a lot of people treat officers like that, but I've seen a lot of officers, not a lot, small percentage, once again, treat people all as criminals.
Sure.
And I hope, and that's what may do things. We try to treat people individually. Like if I met somebody at their house and I would talk to them, give them the benefit of the doubt and try to work things out with them, domestics, whatever was going on in that particular residence. But sometimes, they view you different, but officers view other people different too, especially if they deal with a certain culture or a certain neighborhood. Somebody asked me one time, why did you arrest this amount of individuals on this month for your stats? I said, well, you assigned me to this area and that's all.
Right.
Yeah. I can't pick, a certain person out of a group of demography and choose somebody else. I got to, take it as they come to us. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Along those lines, what would your advice be for some do's and don'ts when dealing with the police?
I tell this to everybody. I actually play a tape in my class because I do a class usually every Saturday or every other Saturday. He's a very popular person, even more popular now, Chris Rock. And
right. Yep.
I don't know if the video was made in 2010 or 8 or 9 or 11, but I've been playing it for about the last 4 or 5 years, since it seems like, once again, politics and the media have tried to divide Americans as a whole.
Right.
Americans as a whole. And I don't know if you know the video. It's how to act on a traffic stop. But I've been teaching this for years, and you guys really need to see the video. It's an older video, but I tell people these are the 5 things you do. One is you pull over in a safe area.
Right.
Nice and easy. No biggie. 2, if it's halfway nice out, roll your window down a little bit so you can communicate with the police. Don't keep it up, because a lot of people want to do that and make the officer's job more difficult, right? 3 is shut the vehicle off. 4 is if it's dark out, turn on your interior lights. And 5 is put your hands on a steering wheel. It's all going to go smooth. If you do those 5 things,
right,
it's going to go smooth. And that officer is going to be so relieved that they're not dealing with something. And then how are they not supposed to act when somebody says, what the F do you want? Why are you pulling me over? And there's no plates on the car. The tags are bad. And they're like, well, that's just a minor offense. But at the end of the day, the traffic violation penal code in Michigan is like 500 pages of small print. And I'm like, so they do have a right to pull you over. And then a lot of the kids that come into my class are like, and I say kids, young men, they're,
right,
21, 22, 23, 25, whatever. And I say, and they're like, well, they don't have any reason to pull me over, Mr. Melki. And I'm like, if they see a traffic violation, hell, the depth of your tread of your tires can be checked.
Right.
Well, we didn't know that. And, nothing hanging and mirrors working and turn signals and the plates, with 2 screws and a license plate, everything. And they're like, well, we didn't know all that. They're just getting bad information. A lot of it may be from parenting, bad upbringing, or just an ignorance of the school districts. I don't know. Schools are very important. It comes back to the schools now, right? I'm not blaming them. I'm just saying that, we don't have some discipline in some places. So I say, if you do those 5 things, that officer's going to treat you like a honeybee. They're going to be very nice to you. They're going to be very polite to you. But if you start off on the wrong foot, it's just going to escalate. And I guarantee you, and I always tell them this, and this is the safety net. I tell every person, I've trained almost 12,000 lessons over the last 20 years. I tell them, I say, listen, if the officer you think was rude, bad, nasty, mean, a racist, a misogynist, whatever, all the popular words going out there now, I simply do this. Document the best you can right after it happens. without sticking a phone in his face.
Right.
And I guarantee you, and you can call me if it doesn't help, you call that police department, you talk to the chief or his lieutenant or his internal affairs, and I guarantee you if that person's had that type of trouble, they're already going to know, and they're just waiting for people to do what?
Right, waiting for the complaints
Yeah,
to come in.
it's like this. When I had a couple officers, they get one complaint. I had this one officer that would like girls to show him his, you know what, or, you know, their, you know, the cute cleavage. And I'm like, wow, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
And I says, I can't believe he would do that. So we kept book on him, internal affairs, and you know, about every 3 or 4 months we'd get that complaint. So after 2 or 3 complaints from 2 or 3 different people, guess what?
Yeah, right, you're done.
Yeah, we know what's going on. Then we set up a sting and we can get them. But if we don't know that, and you just go home and
right, make a Facebook post.
Yeah, this guy was an asshole, right. And he may be, or that girl was an asshole. But I'm telling you, and I tell all these young guys that, and they all kind of shake their head. I'm telling you, a lot of these young kids that come into my class, whether they're white, black, I'm Arab, I'm 100% Arab, brown, they all shake my hand. They're like, I didn't think about it that way, and blah, 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 and thank you. And then I give them one more example. I say, listen, what happens if we do pull you over for a legit reason?
Right.
Okay? You know, you don't think it's legit, but we think it's legit, okay? Give me your information. If you start a bunch of shit and now the officers are just kind of like hands off, we'll let you go, and they let you go, and then you drive down the road and they killed your little brother because he didn't have a driver's license and the officer didn't want to challenge him, or the officer didn't want to check to see if he had a valid license and he didn't have the plate switched on the vehicle or whatever, now you're still mad at the police officer. And now you're going to sue the department for $38 million because he had him stopped, because everything's computerized now for the most part. We know everything that they do. And then they let him go because they're like, hey, Sarge, hey, Lieutenant, there was 14 cameras in my face. And I was in a bad neighborhood, and everybody's looking at me. And I pulled the guy over. Yeah, I let him go. I just thought it's not worth me losing my job, my life, or being sued and ostracized on one of the news networks. You know what I mean? Like this thing happened in Grand Rapids just recently. You know, where they, yep. And that was, we could talk about that later. But anyways, and then that person leaves. We'll give example of Grand Rapids thing. The guy says, oh shit, I don't want to fight. I'll call for backup. I'll wait till my backup guy comes. The guy jumps in the car, takes off, kills 2 people down the road. Who's in trouble?
Right.
It's not Drew. It's not Nick. It's not Chuck. It goes right back to the officer police department. So they're in a no-win situation. So that's why I tell these young guys, just cooperate. If he or she's a shithead, let me know. Let one of the police departments know. They're going to get it forwarded up, and it'll be taken care of. Because you know what? Remember I told you about that 90% of good cops and 10% are really golden type people that go way out of their way to help people. Actually, it's actually more than that. That was a low number I gave. But the other 90% of the officers don't want that 10% working with them.
Right.
They really don't, because in my experience of that 40-some years, they don't want them there. The municipality doesn't want them there. You got unions. Once again, that's a double-edged sword. Me, I was the union president. But I used to go in and tell them. I used to tell the sheriff, if I knew the guy had some suspicion, yeah, go ahead and suspend him for 5 days. I'll fight it, but I won't fight it too hard. And maybe he or she will learn a lesson.
Right. Wake up.
Yeah. I know that was a long-winded answer.
Well, it's a good one though. So switch back to firearms training. There's a lot of communities in here, or in the general area, and a lot of people are starting to get their CPLs. A lot of people are starting to carry in just because they feel safer. We're passing gun laws. It seems like every day there's a new gun law proposed. What's your opinion on that as a police officer? Would you like to see more people carrying or less people carrying, or
Okay, here we go again, Nick. Long-winded answer. I got sent to D.C. back in the 90s, early 90s, late 80s, on gun rights. Most police departments back in the 80s were not anti-gun, but anti-everybody having a gun.
Right. I would agree with that to an extent.
Yeah. I mean, they just, they were like, the more guns out there, the more we're going to get hurt. If somebody has a gun on them, they're probably a what? Bad guy.
Right.
There was what a law used to be called CCW. Me and the union president, really smart young police officer, Paul Kuhn, he's left since then. He was in charge of the union at Flint City. They sent us to D.C., They sent us to the state of Michigan. We went a couple places because we were young police officers. We were in charge of the unions, which had some clout. What do you think about gun rights, Mr. Melki? I think everybody should be able to have a gun as long as they're legal. they haven't been in trouble, and they've had proper training.
That's the hang up.
Now, fast forward. So the law changed, and I can tell you about the law because I sat a couple times on the CCW board and was heavily involved in it at the sheriff's office, because the sheriff's office and the prosecutor's office ran it along with the state police representative. It was very biased. Make a long story short, they changed the law July 1st of 2001. It's been 20 years now, 21 years. So now we have a shall issue state versus a may issue state.
Right.
May issue means basically you came in at a table like this. The sheriff, his designee, someone from the department, a designee from the prosecutor's office, and a designee from the state police post came. You'd say, hey, why do you need it? Then it used to be called CCW. We still use the word interchangeably.
Right.
CCW, CPL, but I'll tell you the real difference. We would decide based on politics. That's why the states changed them. And some of the other places did it because maybe Drew and me are from, like I said, political offices, the prosecutor and sheriff's office, which are highly politicized elected offices. You would come in and you would be a union president from one of the local UAW halls in Flint, and you controlled 5,000 votes. So they would tell us to vote for who? To get his what?
Right.
I might be down on things you don't want guys want to hear. Should I keep going?
Oh, please keep going.
Yeah. So that's how it happened.
Right.
So I'd be like, well, that's some shit. That ain't fair. Go back to that upbringing, you know what I mean, that they either instilled as a relatively honest person or, you know, and I'm not saying there's anything to do with honesty or not. It just was a slighted system. And Drew and you came in and said, well, hey, I need a CCW because there's an asshole that's next door to me and he threatened to kill me. And back then we're like, nah, don't worry about it. If he comes to your house, shoot him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Type thing. You don't need a CCW. But really, you kind of did. The guy may be following you. I mean, I don't know all the circumstances. And then the third person would come in, and they're a store owner. I'll say one of my cousins, one of my Arab cousins I used to call. And they were big contributors to who? The political offices.
Right.
Hey, yeah, here's some money, cousin. Take this money. I want you to win for prosecutor. I want you to win for sheriff. And then they would tell us to do what? Give them the what?
Yep.
Permits. I'll give you one more crazy one. Pastors from the north end of Flint would come in. Hey, we need a CCW. Okay, you got one. You know why? Because you control the congregation of what?
Wow.
Voters. Yeah.
500, 1,000 voters. So that's the way it worked. Hence, shall issue CPL law. Now they treat everybody the same. There's a set of rules. You got to be 21. You know, basically no felony convictions, no major misdemeanor convictions in the last 3 or 8 years, depending on the crime. You don't have to be any mental instability, any involuntarily hospitalized. I could go on. There's like a list of 47 rules. But anyways, so now when you come in, you don't even come into that table. They do a quick background check on you. If you don't have any of those disqualifiers, I love this law. They treat everybody what?
The same.
The same. You all get a CPL. Here's the problem. Huge problem. The law requires you to have a minimum of 8 hours of training. It doesn't say 7.5 hours. It doesn't say 6 3/4 hours. It doesn't say 6 hours and 15 minutes. It says 8 hours.
Right.
I've always done my classes based on the law and being fair over and above. So we go a minimum of 9 hours plus an hour and a half of break. So that way we go about a 10.5 hour day, if that makes sense to you. So I met the what? The minimum and over the requirements law. I know people, and I've reported this to public officials in Genesee County. They're selling them at the McDonald's.
Right. Right. You see their flyers everywhere. I know.
Yeah, there's flyers. And you could come in and you're like, I'm not going to sit through no stupid ass 10-hour class. I already know the law. I watched a YouTube video. I'm more, and I shoot at the gun range, and I know, and I grew up around guns, so I know everything I need to know. And then what they do is they'll find an unscrupulous instructor, which there's many of them out there. I've always been an advocate that they should check the instructors.
Right.
Send a spy into mine. Don't tell me who it is, because I go over and above, and I want everybody else to do it. So you go to an unscrupulous instructor. You say, hey, Chuck, I'll give you $200. Just give me a certificate so I can go down to the county and get my what?
Right,
CPL.
right.
And as long as you don't have any disqualifiers, you have it. You're actually harming the public, guys like me, you, other people out there, because then this fool just went out and got a CPL, has no formal training, which 8 hours isn't enough, but I think that's the bare minimum.
Absolutely.
And then they're out there carrying a gun, and then you get two different cultures of people that meet each other at the gas station. Nobody knows the freaking laws. and they start jawing to each other. And then me and you are in between the pumps, helping our gas. And we went to a legit class. We know the rules of engagement. And these two fools start shooting each other. Mm-hmm. And we're what? So they're really harming the public. I don't know. I've complained to 3 different offices in the last 7 years. And they just shrugged their shoulders and looked at me. And they're our county officials.
Wish I could say I was surprised by that.
Yeah. I don't want to mention their names on here, but if I ever drank some whiskey or bourbon, maybe I would. Right. But, and I asked him, I said, listen, could you do me a favor? I've had several people, and this happens every 4 or 5 months, 6 months, whatever. Yeah, I've been to CPL, Mr. Melki, but I don't feel comfortable. I'd like to come to your CPL. Okay, great. Got to pay the fee again, my fee.
Right.
But you're going to come in and get outstanding training. They come in, and then the first hour they're saying, I was never taught any of this stuff. I don't know any of this stuff. What the heck is going on? And because they went to a 2 or 3 hour or even an 8 hour class from somebody that's not qualified to do the training. Once again, there should be aptitude tests for the instructors, not just being able to buy a license saying that I'm an instructor now and I can do it. And then what's even worse is by law, you're supposed to go to a 4 hour class every 5 years to get renewed. And that law is a little bit vague, but it says you should have 3 hours of formal training and 1 hour of gun range. So when somebody comes to me and says, I'd like to get recert, I make them do 6 hours of training because the law has changed so much every 5 years, do 1 hour of shooting, and then I give them a recert. But I know people that have told me, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go in there and say that I did take it. And the issue is that it's a 4-year felony.
Right.
So when you sign that state affidavit saying you took an 8 hour class on the first class, and you know the difference between 8 hours and 4 hours, you just committed a what?
Felony.
Felony, 4-year. And then you're carrying your gun illegally concealed because your CPL was obtained illegally. So now you're carrying a concealed weapon, which is your second 4-year felony. This is the big problem. You pull your gun on somebody, maybe you shoot them, maybe you don't. Maybe you get a sharp detective or a sharp prosecutor and they say, hey, listen, we got some questions about this. It doesn't really look right. Let me do a little background check. Could you give us your certificate? Tell us who trained you and tell us the course curriculum.
Oh, they're definitely going to ask that.
Yeah. Now guess what happens? You're all done. Even if your shooting was good or you pulled the gun right. You see what I'm saying? You've got 2 technically felonies you committed. You shouldn't even been carrying a gun to begin with. Now it's the old adage, am I better off being tried by 12 and carried by 6? Okay, maybe you won't get convicted, but you'll be sued for everything you own by that family and they'll win because that's only a preponderance of the law versus, beyond a reasonable doubt, 99%. So this gun thing is getting out of hand. It's a good policy. It's a policy that works as long as the rules are enforced. And a lot of the public officials I've addressed to it said we don't have the time for it. And of course I argue being stubborn. I said, listen, go to Mott Community College. Get a couple criminal justice students, right? Both of these individuals looked at me. What do you mean? Give them $100. We had confidential informants all the time. I used them for 20 years in police work, working as a detective. Pay them $100. Send them to somebody's class. Mm-hmm. Have them come back, do a short essay, which would be great for their college class to begin with. Yes, this is what the person taught me in 1 page or less, and this is how long I was there.
Right, just double check them.
Yeah, so it costs you $100, and the ones that aren't doing it, pull their license. How hard is that?
Right.
No, absolutely, and I agree that proper training piece, it's huge. And yeah, I'm pro Second Amendment. I think a lot of people say it and don't mean it. And everyone tells you, I've been shooting since I was a kid, and I'm sure you hear this stuff all the time.
All the time.
I go take a class. I don't need to give a spiel. Hey, I'm here to learn and get better. Period. And it's funny because I see so many people with CPLs, and I'll go to the range. I might help them zero a rifle for deer season and, shoot some pistols while we're there, and 10 yards. And we got nothing on paper. And I mean, it's got to be pretty prevalent.
It is. I make everybody pass the test in my class. I can't speak for the other classes. I know a couple of really good instructors in the county. I trust them. They do an outstanding job. They take it serious like us. But I know, like I said, I had a young lady come in. She's about 45. She took a class from me. Her daughter took the class at McDonald's. She
at
literally,
McDonald's? Literally at McDonald's?
I swear on a stack of Bibles, she literally told me, Mr. Melki, this is such, and she used some real choice terms. Up in the north end of Flint, there was a gentleman up there with the stickers and the signs and the good old boy. He would meet people at the McDonald's. They would have a Diet Coke, or that's what I drink, or Coke. I'm ad-libbing, whatever they have. They would sit there for an hour. He would show her some things at the restaurant. He would charge her $75 cash, cost him absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? Because he's there for a Coke.
Right.
And then he would sign off on a certificate and give it to him.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
And in fact, I don't know if you guys know, there's a talk show host in Flint. His name is Mike Kilbreth. Mm-hmm. He has an AM talk show. We talked about this 4 or 5 years ago.
Really?
And it was about, maybe it might have been a little longer, 6, 7 years ago. And he's like, I told him the exact same story. And he was a little apprehensive. So I said, call 2 places, Mike, these like private places. You know, you pick them, but you call, there's 7 places right here. Call 2 or 3 of them. He called 2 of them. And he's got the gift of gab. He's a talk show host like you guys. And he's like, hey, I'd like to get a CPL and blah, blah, blah. And he's talking to the guy. He's in the phone in my office. He's like, oh, it's $125. Yeah, I don't really have 8 hours. Can we do it like in 3 or 4 hours? Both of the instructors agreed to do it in 3 or 4 hours over the phone. Wow. He never fought. I mean, I think he mentioned it on his radio show, but that's how funny it is or how obvious it is. And they keep, some states are making rules stricter. Some states are making them more relaxed. Once again, it's like Republicans and Democrats.
Sure.
You got this side, you got this side, and nobody wants to come here and do what the right thing is.
Right up the middle, the right thing.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you guys have CPLs. I didn't even ask, nor am I going to ask on the show. But I tell everybody, if you had one, come to our facility.
Right.
You'll get a good CPL. It'll be true and honest.
No, I have for quite a while, as long as I could.
Yeah.
And I shoot a marksmanship training center quite a bit when I can make it up to Lake City. Try to make it a point to take classes there, and not just sign that affidavit that I did my training.
Right, the 1 hour of firearms.
The 1 hour of firearms training, and it's amazing some of the stuff you see. And I tell people, because some people say, "Oh, it makes me feel safer." Like, okay, I can get that, but I feel like some people feel like it's going to be a deterrent, and I don't think it should ever be used in a deterrent way. That pistol for me, I hope it never comes out of the holster.
I use this in
and
school.
It's not coming out of the holster.
It's a tool of last resort. I don't even refer it to a gun. It's a tool, right? It's like a hammer. It's like a sword. It's whatever. It's a tool of what? Yeah. Last resort. And I tell people you need to get updated every 5 years. Actually, more than that. I actually took training. I got a severe handicap. That happened to me a couple years back. But up until then, I was taking 40 to 80 hours of training on my own cost just to do what?
Right.
Because somebody's always going to teach me something. I don't know it all. And you know what? I go to another instructor. I would pick other instructors out of the blue, somebody that had a specialty, and I'd be like, wow, I may know a lot of this stuff, but this guy just taught me these 3 things I can put on my belt, or these 2 things, or these things I can pass on to other students. And to me, it just makes you a better instructor. It makes you more well-rounded. No one's at the top of the ladder. You can be 75 or 80% up at the top of the ladder. God's the only one that's 100% up top of the ladder, I tell everyone. Right, so I tell everybody, get your training, and no matter where they're at on the ladder, I'm going to move them up, I hope. And I have. I've trained 12,000 lessons. Yeah. And I've trained people from SEAL Team 6, the Marine Corps, Rangers. I just had 2 police officers in my course this last Saturday. Oh, and they're just, Chuck, I didn't remember this stuff, or I forgot this stuff, or it's something that you added on, and they appreciated it. They don't have to take the course. They're exempt. But they're like, we'll spend a few bucks. And
well, that's
smart.
Part of being responsible.
Yeah.
Well, there's a huge obligation, in my opinion, to de-escalate, absolute last resort.
Right.
And some of the people I talk to who have CPLs might be proponents of open carry, and that's fine constitutionally, within the law, okay. But why would I ever want to play poker with my cards face up?
Why give up your element of surprise?
I see it at Home Depot all the time, and I'm like, okay, but why would you ever do that?
Those guys are cowboys. We live in a society, although obviously you guys can tell I'm a Second Amendment guy, but at the end of the day, this isn't 1860s. This isn't, maybe some states are really sparse populated where you may drive 100 miles in the desert and not see anyone. Mm-hmm. But we live in a heavily populated area. And it's not, people don't want to go down aisle 7 and get their Cheerios cereal and see some swashbuckler asswipe, with his big 357 or his 40, Smith & Wesson Model 2944 Magnum on a swing holster going up and down. It just makes people feel
uneasy.
It's like, dude, if you got a gun, you went to the proper training. We really are a constitutional state. We are. It's just that they're saying, like any other rule, and I know I would catch some heat from some of the Second Amendment people, but it's like, listen, we're just asking that you have some formal training on the rules of engagement, some things you should do and don't, because most of my class is done on avoidance. I got 6 hours of that 10-hour class on, your mind and security and how to get out of your car, how to get in your car, what to do at your home if somebody breaks in, what to do out on the street. So a lot of it has to do nothing with the gun. It's just like you said, Drew, it's avoiding it. At the end of my PowerPoint presentation, I have a big bold letters. The best gunfight is the one you're not in.
Right.
So you saw what was happening and you avoided it. And then, if you had to get in, it's to maybe save someone else's life or your own or loved ones. But at the end of the day, and I think more and more people, I get a spike in business whenever there's mass shootings. Right. So if there's a shooting somewhere, I'll get 10 or 15 people call me. We need a CPL right now. See, we've went into a lot of time.
Right. No, that's fine. And why would I ever want someone to get the drop on me when I'm in the cereal aisle picking out Cheerios?
They don't even know you're.
You're just making yourself a target, I think, most of the time.
And open carry is ridiculous because if you don't have a CPL,
as soon as you get in the car,
you've concealed your weapon. Now that's no longer a concealed pistol; it's a concealed weapon. It's a 4-year felony. Yep. And I tell people this: okay, so you got this gun, you walk out to Walmart, you do follow the rules, you take the gun off at the trunk, you unload the gun, put the gun in a lockbox, take the ammunition, put it up front, and the two people that were watching go out there and hit you over the head and take your prized possession, right? Because that's a prize for most people.
Right.
Getting a gun off the street, and not having it registered, especially a pistol, which have to be registered in Michigan, but they steal a pistol. I'm telling you, they used to sell hot guns back in the day because I bought hot guns, when I worked Vice and undercover. Mm-hmm. We'd buy a gun for, even if it was a cool gun, $50 to $100. Now they're getting $1,000 to $2,000 from some of my old police buddies for Glocks and Smith and Wessons. Because
who the hell is going to pay more than $1,000 for a Glock you can buy at Williams for $600?
Because they're buying it illegal, it's unregistered, they're buying it hot, nobody knows they got it. Right. So the people out on the street that don't qualify to buy a gun or want a gun, Nick, they'll be like, they'll sell some more weed, or they'll do some of this, or they stole something from somebody else. Here's $1,000. We know that gun you can buy for $500 to $650 at a public gun store. Right. But at the end of the day, they just bought a unregistered gun. They already broke the law several times over, so that is just one more thing in their cap. Yeah.
Oh, we could go on forever.
I told you.
Chuck, you're great. Love talking to you.
I'm sorry I dominated it. When you asked me a question, I'm long-winded.
No, that's all right. No, information's great. So
knowledge is power.
That's true.
I tell everybody. The more knowledge you have, the more powerful you are, and that what makes some people that are public servants dangerous politicians, because they can't sit there like you're the financial guy and bullshit you on on a payment. And you're like, no, that's not the way finances work, or that's not the way this works. And you're absolutely right. Knowledge is power, 100%.
Yes, it is. So, in everything you've done, give us a last lesson on how you've made it through all that. What does Chuck tell himself every morning?
I tell the Lord, thank you for letting me wake up, although sometimes I'm not happy with the way I'm
You're
functioning.
Not happy,
right? My wife, she's been by my side, stands by me. My friends, I have a lot. I mean, friends are what you can usually pick on one hand. They say, and eliminate one. But I've had some really good friends over the years. They come and go and give me good advice. I'm not a rocket scientist. I've just listened to other people. My mother and father were very strict with me. They were from Lebanon. They moved here. We didn't own a party store. My mom was a waitress. My dad worked at V8 Engine. I tell people we weren't these rich Arab people. I was the poor Arab people.
Right.
That's it. Your God, your family, your friends. And if you have a strong work ethic, which that's what was instilled in me, I don't fish, I don't hunt, I don't do much of that stuff. What do I do every day? And I've retired times too. Really, I mean,
right.
That little bit at Clayton, they did something wrong. I called them out on it. Got my dues, which I did not want. I asked them for $1 in apology and give me my job back, and they said, no, here's a check. That's how bad politicians are.
Right.
And the county, and it's all about work. I mean, you got to get them go to work. And I think if I could do anything to these young kids, say, listen, do 3 things. Go to church, find the Lord in your system. Get a good spouse, wife. Now, I know there's all this shit with gender going on right now.
Right. Find a good partner.
If that's what they want to say. I don't believe in that, but that's fine. If that's what I'm not going to pick who you're in love with.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
And as a politician or as a public servant, I'm not going to deal with it.
Right.
I'm not going to pick it. But a wife, get yourself a good wife, Lord first, wife, family, and a good job, and everything will fall into place. And I don't know what else to tell people. That's the 3 things. And err on the side of caution. If you think something's not right, then don't do it. Err on the side of what?
Right.
Caution.
No doubt.
That's why I won so many criminal cases, not because I'm a rock scientist. Remember I told you that court duty? I sat in court like this when I was a young kid.
Right.
As a patrol, watching all the detectives and all the judges and all the prosecutors and manipulating and who's making a good case, who's not making a good case. And I tell people I lost very few cases, just a few in my entire career. And it wasn't because Chuck Melki is a rocket scientist. It's because I had those opportunities at the county to work a lot of different divisions. And that first job that I had as rural patrolman, that made a big impression on me watching those criminal cases and listening to good judges, good prosecutors, good detectives. And the shit ones, I just did what? Right on through. I don't want to hear you.
There you go.
Perfect.
Got to be able to tune it out these days.
Well, you could tell when a detective was not doing a good job. And there was, and back then we actually had more police officers, more detectives. So it's like you have financial people. You're like, this guy's really smart. I learned a lot from him. This guy's a little shady. You do what?
Yep.
Yeah, let him go in and out of your ear and kind of push him away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I was great talking to you guys.
We've really appreciated having you on the show. Would love to maybe have you back sometime.
You could pick my brain. I could go on for hours about stuff.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yep.
And we'll drop the info for your shop in the show notes if you'd like.
That's fine.
And
I appreciate it. It's most of my business is referral. I get some calls from the outside, but if you take my class, you'll say, "Oh, this was a really good class," and then you'll tell your brother, or your sister, or your best friend. That's how I get a lot of business. Yeah.
Right. And same here. That's the best way to get it.
Yeah. Great.
Word of mouth. Thanks, Chuck.
It was fun.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks
everybody for tuning in. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Good.